There's a conversation God has with people in their late 40s that breaks something open. The conversation that starts when you look back at who you were at 25 and realize somewhere along the way you traded your soul for safety. If you wake up at 3 in the morning thinking about dreams you abandoned, if you feel like you wasted your best years on things that don't matter, if you're terrified it's too late to become who you were supposed to be, God has something surprising to say. Because 2,000 years before Instagram told us we had to figure everything out by 30, God had a conversation with a man who spent 40 years thinking he'd wasted his life. Moses' story at age 80 is about to reframe everything you're feeling about the years you think you threw away. But first, meet David. David is 48. Sitting at his kitchen table on a Sunday morning with his laptop open and coffee going cold beside him. His daughter sent him a video file yesterday. Found this on an old hard drive, thought you'd want it. It's him 22 years ago, playing guitar at his daughter Emma's 3rd birthday party. He's 26 in this video, hair longer, flannel shirt, completely absorbed in the music. That guy wrote songs every morning, played coffee shops on weekends, actually believed passion and talent might be enough. David now is an accountant, has been for 22 years. Started as temporary, just until the music thing takes off. The video ends and Emma hugs his leg, and David looks at the camera with this completely unguarded joy. David, now at the kitchen table, feels something crack in his chest. Who was that guy? That guy moved to the city with his wife when Emma was a baby. Drove Uber between gigs, practiced for hours while Emma napped. Got close a few times, got told almost but not quite more than he could count. That guy was broke and scared and alive. The music got pushed to weekends, then occasional weekends. Then, not at all. The guitar went in the closet. The notebooks went in a drawer. He told himself it was responsible, mature, what fathers do. He watches the video 3 more times, and the contrast between that David and this David makes him want to scream. 22 years. Where did they go? He built a good life on paper, steady income, retirement account, nice house, daughter who graduated college. Marriage, that's fine if you don't look too closely. He did everything right according to the script society gives you. And now, every single one of those choices feels like a betrayal. He opens Spotify, searches for his own name. Nothing comes up because he never released anything. Never became anyone. Just this accountant who used to write songs and doesn't. Last Sunday at church, they sang, "It is well with my soul," and David couldn't sing, because nothing is well. His soul is a museum to a person who stopped existing 20 years ago. Emma texts, "Dad, that video made me cry. You were so good. Do you still play?" He types and deletes 3 responses. Finally, "Not really anymore. Work got busy." Work got busy. As if that's a reason instead of a choice you make every single day to do anything except the thing that actually matters. He closes the laptop, looks around at evidence of his responsible life, and thinks about Thoreau. The mass of men lead lives of quiet desperation. That's exactly what this is. Not dramatic suffering that gets sympathy. Just this low-grade ache. This sense you made a terrible trade 20 years ago, and now the store is closed, and you can't get your money back. He's 48, maybe 30 good years left, more likely 20. The math is brutal. He spent the first 25 years becoming someone, the next 23 becoming someone else, and now he's too old to start over, and too young to accept this is all there is. If you're David, If you're looking back at your 20s and 30s and seeing a graveyard of abandoned dreams, God sees what you're feeling. He doesn't tell you to just be grateful for stability. He sees you sitting in that kitchen realizing you traded your soul for a retirement account. This is the silent crisis of late 40s, early 50s. Not the midlife crisis of sports cars and affairs. The real crisis is quieter. Waking up and realizing you spent 20 years becoming someone safe instead of someone real. Studies show life satisfaction hits lowest point at age 47, right when you're old enough to see clearly what you've become, and young enough to remember vividly who you used to be. That gap creates grief with no name. You grew up being told to follow your dreams. Then reality crashed in, rent, loans, families, insurance, and suddenly everyone telling you to follow passion started telling you to grow up and be realistic. So you made what felt like temporary compromises. The corporate job, just for a few years. Put the dream on hold until things are more stable. You told yourself, next year, until suddenly you're 48, and next year has been coming for 2 decades. The church makes this worse sometimes by spiritualizing safety. We call it being a good steward, when really it's fear. We act like God only speaks through security and never through risk. But God's story is full of people who spent years in what looked like waste, who watched time pass thinking they'd missed their chance. Then, when logic said it was too late, God showed up and said, "Now we begin." Moses' story is about to teach you something that might crack open your whole understanding of wasted time. Let's talk about Moses at 80 years old, where he is when God shows up with a burning bush and a mission. 80. By modern standards, retired. Definitely not starting the most important work of his life. But Moses didn't waste just his 30s. He wasted 40 years. His first 40 years in Egypt as a prince. Best education, political power, wealth, connections. If anyone was positioned to help God's enslaved people, it was Moses. Except at 40, he killed an Egyptian and had to flee to Midian, where he became a shepherd. From prince to shepherd. From palace to desert. From someone with power to nobody tending sheep in the middle of nowhere. And he stayed there for 40 years. 40 years of watching sheep. 40 years of thinking about what he could have done if he'd been smarter, more patient. 40 years of regret. Imagine what Moses told himself. I wasted my education. I wasted my connections. I wasted my privilege. I'm too old now. That chapter is closed. Moses at 80 has nothing Moses at 40 had. No power, no palace, no platform. Just an old man with a staff and a stutter. Then God shows up in Exodus 3 and says, essentially, now you're ready. Not, too bad you wasted 40 years. God says now, after 40 years of sheep, after 40 years of what you thought was waste. Now I'm going to use you for what I always planned. Moses argues. He lists disqualifications. I'm nobody. I'm too old. I can't speak well. God doesn't disagree. He just says, I will be with you. The qualifications don't come from who you are. They come from who God is. Here's what changed in those 40 years. Moses' pride got broken. His self-sufficiency got dismantled. His need to be someone got burned away. The man who thought he could save people through his own power became a man who knew he couldn't. And that's the only kind God can use. Those 40 years weren't wasted. They were preparation that looked like waste. Skills Moses learned shepherding, leading, navigating wilderness, patience, humility, exactly what he'd need to lead 2 million people through desert. What looked like dead end was training ground. Moses couldn't lead people who'd lost everything if he'd never lost everything himself. Moses led the Exodus at 80, gave the law at 85, did the most significant work of his life in his 80s and 90s. None of that happens if God calls him at 40, when he still thinks he's qualified. So what does this mean for you at 48? God's timeline doesn't look like yours. What you call waste, he might call preparation. The dreams you gave up might have needed to die so something bigger could be born. The breaking down of who you thought you'd be might be necessary for who you actually need to be. Moses at 40 thought his life was over. Moses at 80 discovered it was just beginning. The questions you're asking in the dark. Question 1. Is it really too late to start over? Depends what you mean. Too late to be 25 with no responsibilities? Yes, that window closed, but too late to reclaim authentic parts of yourself. Too late for God to do something significant with what's left? No, Moses proves it's not. God didn't call Moses to do what 25-year-old Moses would have done. He called 80-year-old Moses to do what only 80-year-old Moses could do. The mission was shaped by who Moses had become. You can't go back. But you can bring your 48-year-old self with everything you've learned and survived, and ask God what He wants to do with that. The mission might look completely different. That doesn't mean it's less significant. Question 2. What if I wasted my best years on the wrong path? You're assuming the wrong path was a mistake God has to work around? What if it was preparation? Moses spent 40 years learning to be a prince. Wrong path, right? Except when God sends him back to Egypt, Moses needs to negotiate with Pharaoh, another prince. The wasted years equipped him in ways desert training never could. Your accounting job taught you discipline, consistency, showing up when you don't feel like it. The path you're calling wrong might be what taught you what you needed for what comes next. Question 3. How do I live with the regret? You don't. Regret grows as big as you let it. Moses could have drowned in regret about his 40s. Instead, when God shows up, Moses says yes, scared yes, but yes, confess the regret, name it, feel the grief fully, then release it. Forgive yourself for being scared. Forgive yourself for choosing security when you had a family to feed. Then ask, what do you want to do with who I am now? Question 4. What if it's too late to be who I was supposed to be? This assumes God had one specific plan and you missed it. But God's calling isn't that fragile. Moses was supposed to liberate Egypt, and he still was, just not on the timeline anyone expected. God's purpose for you isn't locked in some version of you that died. It's alive in the version that exists now, with all your scars and regrets. That person is who God wants to use. Question 5. How do I find my purpose when I wasted so much time? Stop calling it wasted. Moses' 40 years of sheep weren't wasted. They were training disguised as obscurity. Finding purpose now doesn't mean recovering what you lost. It means discovering what you gained. What did those years teach you? What did they kill in you that needed to die? God doesn't give us purpose despite our detours. He gives us purpose because of them. Let's go back to David at his kitchen table, watching himself at 26, feeling the weight of 22 years. David didn't quit his job and move to Nashville. That's not how real transformation works at 48. But he did 3 things over 2 years that changed everything. 1. He picked up the guitar again. Not to become someone, not to make up for lost time, just to remember what it felt like to make something, to be present, to access the part of himself that used to be alive. 20 minutes most mornings before work, stumbling through songs he used to know, humbling and awkward and necessary. His wife Sarah heard him one morning and cried. Not because he was good, he was rusty, but because she'd married someone with music in him and hadn't heard it in 20 years. 2. He stopped calling it waste and started calling it formation. He joined a men's group where the pastor asked everyone to share their story. David started with, "I wasted my 30s," and the pastor stopped him. Try telling it differently. What if nothing was wasted? So David tried. "I spent 22 years learning discipline, how to do things I don't want to do, how to push through when passion runs out. I learned I'm stronger than I thought, and more broken than I thought." Saying it that way didn't erase the regret, but it created space for something beside the regret. 3. He asked God what to do with who he actually is now. Not who he used to be, who he actually is. 48-year-old accountant who used to write songs. The answer came through his daughter Emma, now 25, teaching music at an after-school program. She asked if he'd help teach guitar to middle schoolers one afternoon a week. His first instinct was no, he wasn't qualified. Then he realized he was making Moses' excuse. So he said yes. Scared yes. But yes. Teaching those kids, many from families that can't afford instruments, something unlocked. He wasn't performing, just showing kids how to make sound into song. One kid said, "You make it look easy." David replied, "I promise it's not. I stopped doing this for 22 years because I thought I wasn't good enough. Biggest mistake I ever made. Don't do what I did. Don't wait." David realized his 20s weren't wasted, and his 40s aren't over. There's no lost time to recover. There's just now, this moment, this choice, this kid learning, because David finally showed up. If you're David, if you're looking back at your 30s and seeing nothing but regret, you didn't waste them. Moses thought he wasted 40 years. Then God showed up, and those years turned out to be exactly the preparation he needed. Your 30s weren't supposed to be the peak. They were supposed to be the training. And yes, the training was painful, and parts of you died. But that doesn't mean it failed. Who you are now, scarred and tired and more broken than you planned, that person is qualified for things 25-year-old you could never do. You know things about faithfulness, about showing up when passion is gone, about doing what matters when no one's watching. God doesn't need your youth back. He needs your middle age. He needs what you learned by losing what you thought you needed. Moses led the Exodus at 80. Your life is not over at 48. God can do more with your scarred middle-aged faithfulness than he ever could with your untested 25-year-old passion. The burning bush moment might not be dramatic. It might be small. Teaching guitar to middle schoolers. Writing songs no one will hear. Being present in moments you used to sleep through. You didn't waste your 30s. You just didn't know what they were for yet. Moses didn't know what the desert was for until he was 80, and God showed him. Maybe it's time to stop calling it waste and start asking God what it was actually preparation for. If Moses at 80 could begin the most important work of his life, maybe you're not too old. Maybe you're just getting started.